This is the Mi-28N, the new top helicopter for the Russians in War Thunder, which will be coming into the game in update 1.93. Today I'm going to be taking a look at it on the War Thunder development server, and just giving a general look at the helicopter. So firstly, the Mi-28 is very comparable to the Mi-35M. This is currently the top helicopter for the Russians, and the Mi-28 comes directly after this in the tech tree. Although in most cases actually, the new premium Kar-50 is a bit better due to having more advanced weapons in the form of the Valkyr Atgms. The Kar-50 of course is another new helicopter coming to the game in this update, and I have already made a video on that, link to that in the description. The Mi-28's fixed weapon is a 30mm turret mounted under the nose. This is in fact the same gun that can be seen on the BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicle. Now this does have a few belt types, but the best option will likely be to go with the ground target belts, which actually have up to 100mm of best effective pen, something that will come in handy against lighter targets if you get close enough that you have to use the gun. Now your pylon weapons consist of firstly attacker Atgms. These can also be seen on the Mi-35, but in this case the Mi-28 can carry 16 of these, whereas currently the Mi-35 is limited to only 8 of them. You also have access to the Igla air-to-air missile. These are again seen on the Mi-35 and are also featured on the new Kar-50. In this case though, the Mi-28 can hold up to 8 of these, which is the same as the Mi-35. You do then have a few unguided rocket options, firstly the S8KO rockets, which are fairly common for later Russian helicopters, and then you also have a new type of unguided rocket, the S13DF. Now these are 130mm rockets with 57 kilograms of TNT equivalent explosive per rocket. You can carry up to 20 of these in 4 individual rocket pods, or 10 of them in 2 pods on the inner pylons, and then have guided weaponry on the outer pylons. If you do get close enough to enemy tanks to actually use unguided rockets, these are going to be your best bet. You of course also have access to the standard dual 23mm gun pods. You can have up to 4 of these, which will give you an extra 8 guns to complement your 30mm turret, but it's more likely you will only have 2 of these gun pods on the 2 inner pylons on most loadouts. Moving on from the weapons, the armor on this helicopter is certainly no joke. In some cases, you can actually take quite a beating before going down, as can be seen in this short clip, where it takes 2 direct hits from Stinger air-to-air missiles and a TOW anti-tank guided missile to actually take my heli down. A few other things worth mentioning is that the Mi-28 does get both night vision and thermal vision, something of which the Kar-50 lacks. You also have a radar warning receiver system and flares. Unfortunately, this helicopter does not get a fully detailed cockpit or any additional skins. Hopefully, we can at least get some new skins in-game for it in-game or on the market in the near future. So now getting into a test flight just to demonstrate a few things before we go and get into some gameplay. Firstly, those S13 unguided rockets. These things are extremely fun, and as I said, if you get close enough to use an unguided rocket in an actual game, these things are going to be your best bet. If you land the rockets within a reasonable distance of an enemy vehicle, it is highly likely it will destroy it, as you've just seen with that M1 Abrams, and as you're about to see with the M60. The first ones, they land a bit too far behind, but the second burst lands right next to him and takes him out. I then go for this M163. I do start off by using the gun, although, you know, it doesn't seem to be the most effective. I was using air target rounds at this point, so I fire the rockets, and, you know, he didn't really have any armor, so, you know, the rockets might have been overkill, but it worked nonetheless. The Atgms can lock onto targets, and, you know, they can be used to destroy flying vehicles, be that a slow-moving aeroplane, or in some cases helicopters, but the thing is, unlike the Valkyrs, the attackers do not have a proximity fuse, so you will actually need to score a direct hit rather than just being within a small proximity of the enemy air target. In terms of agility, it is your standard Russian helicopter. It is big, it is heavy, it's not that agile, but unlike the Mi-24s, you can perform maneuvers such as this, where you can do a loop. The only issue is it takes a very large area to do that loop, so not exactly a maneuver you are going to be performing on the day-to-day. You can also do rolls, all that kind of stuff. The Kar-50 is much more agile than this, but the Mi-24 series, they tend to completely lose control and just go into a dive straight into the ground and explode. This can actually do those maneuvers despite it being rather slow and cumbersome when it comes to doing it. So now getting into some actual gameplay, of course ground RB battles. One thing worth noting right off the bat is that helicopters now spawn on a helipad at the friendly airfield rather than the helipad that is closer to the tank battlefield. Although that closer helipad does still exist, so you can go there to rearm your helicopter. Starting off, Car 50 used the Igla air-to-air missile. He fires flares, but, you know, it was a bit late, and that is him taken down. I popped some of my own flares, just to prevent him or another heli, who may know that I'm there, firing an air-to-air missile at me. Of course, though, the flares do not counter against the new proximity fuse Vikir Atgms. First kill on the ground is an IS-2. Group of bot tanks were firing at me, so I just yeeted off an attacker, and, you know, I took him out fairly easily. Against those kind of tanks, this missile is highly effective, but then I decided to go in a bit closer and find the one enemy player who was in a tank. He was in an AMX-30 Brennus, so I go in there, get the S-13 aimed up. The first ones do some damage, but they miss, but then I have a much better aim for the second ones, and that is a direct hit, and that was him completely taken out. That player did then respawn into an aircraft, who I did shoot down, but unfortunately I shot him down just after the game ended, so I was not credited with that kill. As you can see though, when I was attacking him, I did sustain a fair amount of damage, and I am still flying, and still mostly fully operational. So now just a clip from a game where I shoot down 2 enemy helicopters using the attacker Atgms. As mentioned, these do not have a proximity fuse, so you will actually need to get a direct hit rather than just being relatively close to the enemy target. Due to this, I decided not to use the lock-on mechanic and rather use it manually to make sure I would get that direct hit. Car 50 taken out, and then of course we have a Tiger UHT, as can be distinguished by the optics above the rotor. I do fire some flares just to be safe, but I am continually getting the missile to go as close as possible to the Tiger, and luckily I clipped the back of his heli, and that is him taken down. So, you know, 2 enemy helis down, relatively good, and then I decide to go and do some ground attack. Obviously, you can see that the enemy team is capturing some points, and, you know, my team isn't exactly winning on the ground, so I decide to head in, and of course, you have thermal vision, which makes it very easy for you to see enemy vehicles. Already, I can straight away see 2 of them, a Challenger 2 and a Warrior. I decide to go for the Warrior, as that is the sort of lighter target, and as you can see, the ATGM hits and just obliterates the entire crew. So now another clip of using the attacker against enemy helicopters. Of course you have the Igla air-to-air missiles, but there are countermeasures against them, and the attacker has much longer range than the Iglas. So for taking out dangerous enemy helicopters from longer range, this is probably your best bet. I'm using the lock-on system to get the missile most of the way, and then just before it gets there, I turn off the lock, use it manually to make sure I get that direct hit. Moving on from that though, there's pretty much after this just 1 guy left in the game and a bunch of bots. So I take out one of the bots, hit him directly to the front, that is him taken down, and then I get close to the actual player who's in the game, and yeah, the S-13s take out that Challenger Mark III like an absolute beast. Challenger Mark III is of course a Challenger 1 with a bunch more armor, it has some ERA on it, it has additional armor on the sides, but despite all of that, the S-13s make easy work of it with that close explosion just knocking out the entire crew. So now into a final game, just again demonstrating the attackers against helicopters, and in a bit more of the S-13 against some bot vehicles. One thing to say about the attacker, it can be tricky to use at longer ranges. Luckily for me, I have the Mi-35 and I have the attackers on that, so I do have a fair amount of experience using these against other helicopters, especially from helicopter battles themselves. So I have got a fair amount of experience, but long range shots like that can be incredibly useful in terms of keeping yourself out of harm's way while also destroying enemy helicopters. As you can see, the S-13s are quite powerful. If you do miss though, it is likely they won't do much. As you saw there, I misaimed, the missiles went over the enemy target, but I still got a hit. So, you know, even if you miss and you just get a hit or a bit of damage, it is likely you will still get an assist. Direct hit there onto a Sherman, he's dead, and here's a heavy Russian tank, and he is dead as well. After that, most of the bots were dead and the game was about to end. I tried a little aerobatic maneuver. Yeah, don't do this at low level. It is a big, heavy helicopter. It can be done, but it is definitely not the safest thing to do at that kind of altitude. But nonetheless, we won the game. It went relatively well, and again, I have been able to demonstrate the attackers and the S-13s. Of course, it is worth mentioning that Iglas are still incredibly useful, especially against faster flying air targets that, you know, it might be a bit difficult to hit with the ATGMs. Well, that's more or less it from me on the Mi-28 for now. Of course, this is the development server, so stuff is likely to change, but if I was to describe this helicopter, I would more or less say it is a slightly better performing Mi-35. Aside from the S-13s, the weapons themselves are the same. The Mi-35 also has the Iglas, it also has the attackers, so in terms of weapons, it is the same, despite a few small payload differences. But nonetheless, the Mi-28 has slightly better agility, I would say, or just generally, it is a bit more of a forgiving helicopter, which definitely can be demonstrated with some of the sort of more aerobatic maneuvers I did. If you tried them in the Mi-35, it would likely try to kill you. In this, though, it does give you a chance to recover. Of course, the Kar-50 is a highly competitive helicopter as well, that being the premium. I wouldn't specifically say that that is better than this outright, but they are very different helicopters. They suit quite different playstyles. This being a bigger, less maneuverable heli, you want to stay out of close quarters engagements, especially in heli battles. This is the kind of heli, like with the Mi-35, where you find a part of the map where you can sneak around fairly undetected, sneak up on a few enemies, take them out with your missiles, take them out with your guns when you get relatively close. The Kar-50, though, that's more of a yeet it and just go in, guns blazing, and take them out kind of heli. At least that's the impression that I have gained so far. Nonetheless, though, it is nice to see a modification of the Mi-28 finally come into the game. Now we have sort of the well-known Russian helicopters in the game. We have the Kar-50, we have an Mi-28, and of course we have a bunch of Hinds, so it's nice to see that the Russian tree is finally getting all of the helicopters that people know. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy, please consider smashing the like button, maybe even subscribe to the channel. I will, of course, have much more Update 1.93 content coming out soon, be that another dev video for the Augusta Mangusta, and then also live release videos where I would be doing full reviews on the new helicopters and maybe a few other vehicles in both Helicopter EC and ground battles for those helicopter reviews. Anyway though, thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.